In the face of a mountain of gold, the ugliness of human nature is laid completely bare. Some people are willing to pay any price for treasure, others walk down a road of no return in pursuit of revenge. And today's story begins with a treasure hunting recruitment notice. One morning, Hajime was awakened by his mother. She had spotted an advertisement in the newspaper. It was a treasure hunt on a remote island. Anyone who could decipher the clues and find the treasure would receive 1/10 of the reward. His mother urged him to participate. Not only could he pay off their debts, but he could finally buy the motorcycle he had always wanted. Hajime was instantly fired up. However, before joining the expedition, he first had to pass a test. But for a young detective like Hajime, that was hardly a challenge. He quickly passed the examination and successfully boarded the ship for the treasure hunt. There, Hajime met Midori, the daughter of the organizer of the treasure hunt. He also met the family's elderly butler Isaku, as well as the 6 other contestants. From Midori's conversation with Isaku, Hajime learned that their destination was Midori's hometown, Haiho Island. Her father Daisuke was the owner of the island. Midori seemed deeply concerned about her father's condition. After all, she had not seen Daisuke once since leaving the country to study abroad 10 years earlier. As they talked, the ship gradually approached the shore. Not long after stepping off the boat, Midori realized that Daisuke, who was supposed to greet them, was nowhere to be found. At first, no one thought much of it. They assumed Daisuke had simply been delayed by something. But even after everyone braved the pouring rain and arrived at the island's main house, there was still no sign of him. Surprisingly, nobody seemed particularly concerned, because at that moment, their attention had been completely captured by the antiques displayed throughout the mansion. Then, they noticed something very strange. One of the antique statues looked particularly unsettling. Placed in front of it were 8 creepy dolls. The bizarre sight sent chills down everyone's spine. But just then, the large clock behind them suddenly emitted an eerie sound. While everyone was still confused, Hajime suddenly caught a foul odor in the air. The smell seemed to be coming from inside the clock. Without hesitation, Isaku stepped forward and pulled open the clock's cabinet door. Inside was Daisuke's corpse, which had apparently been dead for days. One of the contestants, a doctor named Kohei, immediately examined the body. After performing a preliminary inspection, he determined that Daisuke had been dead for more than a week. Hajime immediately told Isaku to contact the police, but Daisuke had always been an eccentric recluse who disliked interacting with others. As a result, the island had no communication towers or communication equipment of any kind. Worse still, the next supply boat would not arrive for another week. That meant everyone was trapped on this isolated island, cut off from the outside world. Meanwhile, Midori eventually regained consciousness. The thought of her father's death filled her with sorrow. Just then, the treasure hunting group, led by Asato, walked into the room. Their attitude was extremely cruel, without any regard for Midori's grief. They immediately began demanding information about the treasure clues. Faced with their aggressive behavior, Midori reluctantly gave in. Soon, under her instructions, Isaku brought out a folding screen that contained the coded message. After examining it, everyone discovered that the so-called code appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary poem. Even Hajime couldn't find any obvious clues. At that point, Midori began assigning rooms to the guests, but during the process, Isaku suddenly realized something was wrong. He clearly remembered that there should have been only 6 contestants. Aside from Miyuki, who had accompanied Hajime, there should not have been anyone else. Yet standing before him now were 7 participants, which meant one of them did not belong there. One of the contestants, Kyuko, immediately came to a conclusion. She believed the extra person must be the one who killed the island owner. After all, as long as Daisuke was dead, that person would never be exposed. Hearing Kyuko's theory, the faces of the contestants were filled with unease. And so, everyone spent the long night burdened by anxiety and suspicion. The next morning, everyone gathered together for breakfast, but during the meal, someone noticed that Asato had yet to appear. Midori informed them that Isaku had already gone to fetch him. Just then, Hajime suddenly noticed something unusual. One of the dolls beneath the statue in the main house appeared to be missing. Before he could examine it more closely, a sharp pain shot through his foot. Looking down, he realized he had been pecked by a chicken. While everyone laughed at him, Hajime suddenly noticed something near the spot where the chicken had been standing. There was an object stained with a red substance. At first, everyone assumed it was blood, but when Chris picked it up and examined it, he discovered it was only ketchup. Just then, Isaku came running toward them in a panic. He informed everyone that something had happened to Asato. Without wasting a moment, the group followed Isaku to Asato's cabin. The entire room had been splattered with blood. Even more shocking, Asato's manner of death was identical to Daisuke's. At that moment, Hajime finally realized something. Every time one of the dolls beneath the statue disappeared, someone would die. Soon afterward, Kohei began examining Asato's body. Based on his initial findings, he estimated that Asato had died sometime between 10 p.m. and midnight the previous night. But during that period, everyone except Asato had a perfect alibi. Chris disagreed. He argued that the killer could have secretly slipped out, committed the murder, and then quietly returned to the main house. However, Hajime immediately rejected that theory, because traveling from the main house to the cabin required at least 30 minutes each way. Yet everyone who had been in the main house had been absent for no more than 10 minutes. Even Hajime was completely baffled. According to the timeline, none of the people present could possibly have had enough time to commit the murder. Seeing Hajime deep in thought, Miyuki suggested that he take a relaxing soak in the hot springs to clear his mind. Very soon, after finishing his soak in the hot spring, Hajime went into the courtyard alone and began studying the treasure clue poem again. However, he couldn't make sense of the very first line, the crimson bird. Chris believed that the line was not referring to a bird at all, but to a torii gate. According to him, there was a red torii gate on the beach behind the main house, but because it was so far away, Hajime couldn't clearly make out its color. Chris suggested taking Hajime down for a closer look. Before long, Hajime arrived at the torii gate. To his surprise, the gate wasn't red at all, it was black. Hajime turned to ask Chris about it, only to discover that Chris had already disappeared. Just then, thick smoke suddenly began pouring out from a cave behind him. The next second, a stream of scalding hot spring water erupted from the cave. Fortunately, Hajime reacted in time and narrowly escaped being hit. Later, while treating his injuries, Hajime accidentally learned something from Midori. Every day at noon, exactly at 12 o'clock, boiling hot spring water would erupt near the black torii gate, and as far as she remembered, there was supposed to be a warning sign posted nearby. However, what Midori didn't know was that someone had already destroyed the warning sign after his injuries had been treated. Hajime happened to notice a framed photograph hanging inside the room. According to Midori, the man standing in the center of the photo was her father Daisuke. Standing beside him was a university professor named Siki. He had died during an accident on the island 10 years earlier, and the child standing in front of Siki was his son Koichiro. At that moment, Miyuki noticed that Koichiro was actually of mixed heritage. Meanwhile, Hajime made an even more important discovery. That evening, he sought out one of the contestants, Yahagi. Hajime had realized that Yahagi, the murdered Asato, and another contestant, Ryujo, all appeared in that photograph from 10 years ago. Curious, Hajime wanted to know what had really happened back then. After repeated questioning, Yahagi finally revealed the truth. 10 years earlier, they had also come to the island in search of the treasure, but during the hunt, Professor Siki accidentally lost his footing and fell off a cliff. After the tragedy, they abandoned the treasure hunt and left the island. Only Daisuke chose to stay behind. After hearing the story, Hajime prepared to leave. Before he left, Yahagi reminded Hajime to be careful around Chris. It turned out that earlier in the day, Yahagi had witnessed the entire incident in which Hajime got into danger. After returning to his room, Hajime began paying much closer attention to Chris. However, while he was deep in thought, he suddenly noticed that one of the cabins in the distance had burst into flames. The fire wasn't extinguished until the following morning. Looking at Ryujo's charred body, Hajime couldn't help but feel puzzled. He couldn't understand why the killer had not only murdered him, but had also deliberately set the cabin on fire. Just then, he noticed a watch lying on the ground. Based on the time at which the watch had stopped, Hajime concluded that Ryujo had died at around 11 o'clock the previous night, and during that time period, the only person without an alibi was Kohei. Kohei immediately became nervous. He repeatedly insisted that he wasn't the killer. The more he spoke, the more agitated he became. Eventually, he ran straight into the main house. Seeing this, Hajime quickly chased after him, but the moment he entered, he noticed something disturbing. Another doll beneath the statue had disappeared, and this time, the missing doll had been thrown into the furnace. The doll's death closely mirrored the way Ryujo had died. At that moment, Kohei suddenly emerged holding a gun. He demanded that everyone leave the main house. All he cared about now was protecting himself. Seeing how unstable Kohei had become, everyone had no choice but to retreat from the mansion. Hajime and Miyuki later gathered by the shore to discuss the series of incidents. Then, without warning, 2 gunshots rang out. Hajime immediately rushed toward the sound with Miyuki, but when they arrived, they found Kohei already dead, shot and killed. Meanwhile, Chris stood nearby, mocking the already dead Kohei. His attitude infuriated Yahagi. Yahagi directly asked Chris whether he was Seki's son. Chris immediately denied ever knowing anyone named Seki. Then he provocatively asked Yahagi whether he had done something to betray Seki 10 years ago. Night soon fell, for safety reasons. While Miyuki was taking a bath, Hajime deliberately stood guard outside the hot spring area. However, a misunderstanding occurred, and Miyuki ended up splashing him with water. Helpless, Hajime went to the restroom to wring out his soaked clothes. Just as he was about to dry his pants, Midori happened to walk out of the bathroom. The string of embarrassing misunderstandings left Hajime thoroughly frustrated. He walked over to the window hoping to clear his head. Instead, he accidentally noticed something unusual. The black torii gate was affected by the changing tide. That discovery instantly made Hajime realize something important, but before he could fully piece it together, his train of thought was interrupted by Miyuki, who had just finished her bath. But just as they were about to leave, Hajime accidentally noticed something strange. Miyuki's hairpin, which was supposed to be silver, had changed color, and with that single discovery, Hajime immediately understood everything. He then instructed Miyuki to gather everyone at the Black Torii Gate, while he went ahead to arrive there first. Sure enough, he saw the cave that had changed due to the rising tide, but when he ran inside, he found Yahagi already murdered. At the same time, the rest of the group also arrived. When Isaku saw the slain Yahagi, he immediately raised his gun at Chris. He was utterly convinced that Chris was Seki's son, but Hajime firmly refuted this, knowing full well that Chris was not the killer. Then Hajime began to lay out his reasoning. The first thing they needed to figure out was how the killer was able to move quickly between the main house and the cabin. The distance required at least 30 minutes to walk. In reality, all the victims had been attacked in the cave they were now standing in. Hajime realized that from the main house to this spot, it didn't even take 10 minutes. The killer had used the fragments of the torii gate to lure the victims here. Hajime suspected that the black torii gate had originally been red, but over time, daily eruptions from the hot spring had caused it to oxidize into black. Understanding this, Hajime could deduce the killer's method. The killer would murder each victim in the cave, then quickly return to the main house. Late at night, the killer would return the bodies to the cabin, then pour chicken blood inside, creating the illusion that the murders occurred there to prevent evidence from being discovered by the authorities. After killing Ryujo, the killer even burned Asato's cabin, destroying any traces of the crime. The only person capable of orchestrating all this was Midori, the one assigning everyone's rooms. Confronted with the accusation, Midori vehemently denied it, but Hajime stepped forward and tore Midori's clothing, for Midori was actually a man. He was Koichiro, Seki's son. Hajime continued, Kohei's death occurred because he had accidentally seen Koichiro changing clothes. Hajime knew that Koichiro was cross-dressing because not long ago he ran into him in the bathroom. Normally, a girl would put the toilet seat down when using it, and only a man would leave the toilet seat up. Hearing Hajime's deduction, Koichiro no longer denied anything. He immediately confessed. Everything he had done was to avenge his father Seki. Koichiro explained that the treasure site had actually been discovered by his father 10 years ago, but Seki had no intention of keeping it. He had planned to hand it over to the government. However, Daisuke and the others had found out. They opposed the idea of giving it to the authorities, and a conflict broke out. During the argument, Seki accidentally fell off a cliff. From that moment on, Koichiro had secretly sworn to make Daisuke and the others pay. Hearing this, Hajime also realized the real Midori must have been killed by Koichiro as well. Koichiro became extremely agitated. Just as he started to explain, Isaku shot him. It turned out that Isaku had returned to claim the treasure for himself. He then aimed a gun at Hajime, but at the critical moment, Kyuko suddenly fired, wounding Isaku. It was revealed that she was a police investigator sent to investigate the island. Isaku, with no escape, greedily lunged for the gold, but he triggered a trap. In the next instant, the cave statue collapsed, crushing Isaku beneath it. As the statue fell, the cave itself began to shake violently. Everyone rushed toward the exit, but when Hajime emerged, he suddenly remembered that Koichiro was still inside. Without hesitation, he ran back in. The next second, the cave entrance was completely blocked by falling rocks. When Koichiro regained consciousness, he saw Hajime tirelessly digging through the rubble. Seeing Koichiro awake, Hajime asked him about the real Midori. Koichiro told him, although he had hated Daisuke, he never expected to fall in love with Midori. Since being together, every day had been happy, until one day, their passionate love life was shattered by a letter from Daisuke. Daisuke wrote in the letter that he planned to gather another group of people for the treasure hunt. Once the treasure was found, he would kill everyone involved. Unable to bear the thought, Midori had chosen to take her own life. From that moment, Koichiro's long-dormant desire for revenge was reignited. Hajime said nothing, continuing to dig away the rocks blocking the cave. Koichiro urged him to stop struggling, saying they were bound to be trapped there anyway. But Hajime firmly told him, whether we fall into the abyss or survive in the darkness, everyone has the ability to change their fate. Hajime's words left Koichiro stunned. Seeing Hajime's unwavering determination, he was finally moved. Working together, the two of them eventually saw a glimmer of light, symbolizing a new beginning.